So in the 1970s, the U.S. Built the ACH network. So ACH stands for Automated Clearinghouse, and it's the network that is used to exchange all value electronically here in the U.S. So every single payment that we send electronically goes through this ACH network. This includes, direct deposits from work, sending Venmo payments, government taxes, and the snippet here is taken from the ACH website, which just shows that last quarter alone, the value of these payments that was processed was $18 trillion. So it's a whole lot of money. And I know we haven't talked about Bitcoin yet, but I think it's important to first understand what ACH is to really understand why Bitcoin has garnered so much interest. So what is this ACH network? The ACH network, the tech behind it is really just one big ledger system, right? Where all the ledgers are owned and managed by these different financial institutions. And so back in the day, before computers, each bank, they held a ledger, and this is how they manage all the balances and transactions of each of the accounts that existed within each of these respective banks. And the ledger has been used by hundreds of years for anyone managing finances. It's not just banks or companies, but also individuals. And still to this day, it's a tool that's being used. But the difference is that the ledgers are purely digital. And so if you have everyone that has a Citibank account has an account in Citi's ledger. If you have an account with Chase, you have an account with Chase's ledger. And each of these individual ledgers, again, it's built and managed by these different financial institutions. And these individual ledgers, they connect into one global ledger, which is managed by the Federal Reserve. So the ACH network, which is basically this communications network of value, where each bank is securing and upkeeping their own ledgers and using this global ledger of the Federal Reserve as the central authority that can look through all the transactions that are taking place and are being processed and just make sure that there's no bad actors that are double spending dollars or creating new digital dollars trying to commit fraud, right? And the native currency, right, and the unit of account for this network is the US dollar. So this is what's being sent back and forth, but then also what's being used in the ledgers to measure the balances of these accounts, right? And this network, again, it's what's used for every transaction done electronically here in the US. So if you have a Chase account and you want to send money to someone with a Wells Fargo account, realistically what you're doing is you're first requesting your financial institution to say, hey, send money to this person. The bank now sends that transaction to the Federal Reserve. Once the Federal Reserve checks to make sure it's a valid transaction and there's no fraud going on, it then sends the money to the receiving financial institution, and then that bank places the money in the receiver's account. And throughout this transaction, each entity was making all the updates into their own ledgers, right? And realistically, you're not the only one that's sending this transaction, right? There's thousands of other people that are also requesting their banks to process these transactions. And because all the transactions have to go to the FRB, and the FRB has to check all the transactions, what the banks do is that they don't send your transaction right away, right? They hold on to it, they queue it up, and they basically send about 2 or 3 batch transactions to the FRB a day. And each of those transactions contains thousands of different transactions. So maybe they'll send one at 1 p.m., another one at 3, maybe another one later in the evening, right? And the banks are basically doing this just to be more efficient, right, and kind of minimize the instances where there could maybe be like a loss or an issue with a transaction, right? But this is also the reason why it takes days for payments to settle, right? If you were to send something in the weekend, it won't settle until the next business day because the system isn't running, right? These are ledgers that are ran and managed by these different companies. So there's humans operating these networks during the business hours. And so going back to the first slide, this is just the answer that the U.S. provided to creating a protocol for sending money over the internet. And granted, this is just for the U.S., right? So if you want to send money to some other country, someone in another country would have to go through their versions of the ACH network, right? We would have to go through something that connects all these networks together. We would have to change the unit of account because there's another currency in this other network, so there's currency conversions, and all of that, it ends up being what causes all these delays in payments actually settling, right? And on top of that, the users of these networks, we become completely reliant on these financial institutions that are allowing us to send these digital transactions back and forth. So it makes people place a large amount of trust in these entities that are facilitating all these digital transactions.